This video is October 2020's Patron's Pick. If you're interested in voting for November's, head on over to my Patreon right now and vote tomorrow.
Kaiju, Dragon Ball, Pokemon, and more. It's Steven's Toy Reviews.
Hey there, collectors, it's Steven here, and Terror of Cyber Kaiju, Strange Beast, and what beasties we have in front of us. Today, or now, because today I've taken a look at several things, but for now we are going to be taking a look at a blast from the past. Ancient Egypt. We're going to be taking a look at Mattel's 13-inch Egyptian god models of Obelisk the Tormentor, Slifer the Sky Dragon, and the Winged Dragon of Ra. Best to my knowledge, these debuted well over 15 years ago, and these have shot up on the aftermarket. Lots of folks with their 6-inch scale Yu-Gi-Oh figures have been looking to get their hands on Egyptian gods, and these may be the only way to really get ones that fit in with those displays. But are they worth the price? And have they held up with time? Well, let's take a look to see whether or not they're worth adding into your collection. In the anime, we were introduced to them pretty much in the order of Obelisk the Tormentor, Slifer the Sky Dragon, and the Winged Dragon of Ra. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do that the same. Obelisk the Tormentor. Very cool. As you'll see in a little bit, this is the most action figure-y of the bunch, but something you're going to notice kind of right away is that Obelisk is using two different colors here. What's going on? Well, unfortunately, Obelisk is made of two different sorts of plastics. One of them is going to be hard and the other is going to be kind of soft. If you're familiar with some He-Man figures or just, general blue figures, over time, those can sometimes fade thanks to sunlight or just general time, it seems like, at least in this case. And unfortunately, Obelisk turns out looking like our friend Skeletor from those vintage figures. Yeah, now I can say that this seems to be a running theme with Obelisk. Unfortunately, I have two Obelisks and two Slifers, so I'm going to be able to talk to those two with experience. Pretty much all the ones that I've seen on eBay and from my own personal collection, parts of Obelisk have turned a different color blue, almost green. That just seemingly happens with time. Yeah, there are some tutorials on how to fix this issue, most specifically with old Skeletor figures. I tried that kind of sort of halfway with Obelisk here. Didn't really work, but still, Obelisk looks great. The overall representation here is fantastic. The only downside is that Obelisk has splayed hands, almost like he's getting ready to fire a Kamehameha. If you were to put them together in that pose, those hands would work perfect. He doesn't have fists, so he can't use the Fist of Fate. All right, so it's maybe different in different languages, but come on, he punches. You know what I'm talking about. So, generally speaking, even with the unfortunate color change over the years, Obelisk is very nice looking. On to Slifer the Sky Dragon. Something to take note of, like I did make mention, these are models. They are not action figures. So when you get these, ideally back in the day, they'd come on their runners and with the sprues and the little bits you had to cut and shave off. So you may notice that throughout this review, you'll see different parts of the different gods, looking like there was a part either sliced off or pulled off. It's probably because there was a little tab that had a number on it. So this way, when you look at the instructions, you can just put them all together. Speaking of putting them all together, Slifer here has a little bit of a pain in the dupa. You can pretty much see all the seams on this guy here. Not really a big deal. I'm going to talk about the price point here in just a minute. But for those seams, those are all different connection points for Slifer. And having two of these back when they first came out and just recently haven't gotten another one, Slifer basically just likes to fall apart. It's unfortunate, but that's just the case. That even goes back to the Figuart Shenron, so I have to think that this sort of goes with the skinny noodle design of dragons. And unfortunately here for this particular example, because this was a used one I found in a local shop, this one has a whole bunch of paint scuff, so please forgive that. Otherwise, Slifer is looking very good here. The paint application, which you did not have to paint yourself, that's something I did forget to mention earlier, but I'm mentioning it now. The paint application is just fine for the price point, which I'm going to talk about the price point when we get to Ra. Yeah, I mean, realistically speaking, Slifer here does look pretty dang cool. Very big, nice shelf presence. Now you'll notice that I custom made a stand here for Slifer. Why is that? Well, in this particular Slifer, the stand was missing. Now for my old Slifer, I don't know where that stand is, and he's in a quadrillion parts, so I just made one out of different Tamashii Stage Act support stands. One of the issues here with Slifer is he's got a long noodly body. The support stand for Slifer only helps support him at the base and at no other part. So as you can see, he's very long and he twists and he turns a little bit. So with only that support there at the base, which the support stand looks exactly the same as Ra's, he's going to warp and droop over time. So if you do get this one, I would recommend even doing what I did here and creating some sort of supplemental support. So this way, Slifer doesn't warp. You don't want that. Last, but most certainly not least in terms of effects in the anime, or TCG support, but by basic card effects by itself, they kind of screwed Ra over in the actual card. Yeah, I mean, he's kind of bad. The Winged Dragon of Ra. Now, I've kind of noted some issues with the other gods right off the top. I'm going to talk about this one here. I did get Ra back in the day, but unfortunately, I had a very energetic St. Bernard who chewed up Obelisk. So I got Obelisk, I got Slifer, and then I got Ra. I didn't make Ra, and then my St. Bernard chewed up my Obelisk, so I don't really have fond memories of Ra here because I never got to build him. So this is my first real time getting to talk about Ra in any capacity, so that's pretty sweet. Unfortunately here for my Ra, he does have a bent wing. I tried heating it, I tried putting it in the freezer, I tried everything that I basically could to reset this, and unfortunately I just couldn't get that to happen. So do take note, if you get Ra, hopefully you won't have this issue that I sort of have. So let's talk about Ra. What was the deal here? Well, when I got Ra, I opened him up out of the box, he was very sticky. Yes, now I do have a video on how to fix that, which is basically hot tap water, soap, toothbrush, bing, boom, you're good to go, and that worked wonders here. So if you do have that issue, don't worry, you'll be able to take care of that with my handy dandy video tutorial. Now, in regards to the overall sculpt and the overall look of Ra, Ra actually appears to have a little teeny tiny bit of glitter injected. It has a nice shine to it. I don't know specifically if it's glitter, but it looks very impressive in hand. The paint application once again looks good, except for the blue jewel on the head, which on that note, on all of the gods, they do have that. It would have been awesome if they would have just been translucent plastic, but you can see the seam, and it's kind of not even on Ra, so that's a little bit of a disappointment, but otherwise, Ra is pretty dang awesome here. Very nice pose. The support stand is nice and center, so even if Ra sort of begins to tip over a little bit, everything looks like that shouldn't happen. So this section is probably going to be the shortest for Ra because I think that in terms of overall display, there's nothing really that I can say here. Ra just looks fantastic. And in terms of being sort of the quote-unquote head honcho of the gods, I mean, let's face it here, there's a whole booster set named after it, the Rage of Ra. Yeah, I mean, Ra's great. Oh, let's talk about that price point. The price tag are on the boxes for all of these guys. Yes, actually, I picked all of them up at the same time because they were on sale at a local shop. They still have the original sales sticker on them from Walmart. $14 and I think 87 cents. That was about their MSRP. Now let's move on to the articulation of the gods, and we'll go from the least articulated to the most. As I made mention, Slifer is a whole bunch of parts put together, and unfortunately they're relatively loose on both of the units that I had, so this is pretty consistent. Those aren't points of articulation though. Slifer is basically only going to have 3 ball joints on both the left and right arm and, well, what's effectively the left and the right leg. Not a whole lot of movement there. They just kind of wiggle and they pop out if you stress them a little too much. So, say la vie, full ball jointed movement. I kind of just wiggle them around here because realistically speaking, that's about all you're going to be able to get. Not a whole bunch of posability out of Slifer. And then where the head plugs into the body, that's going to be a swivel. So you can kind of sort of spin Slifer's head around. Now we have Ra here in front of us. I know Slifer didn't really have a whole lot of articulation to talk about, but here we are. Ra, we're going to have some swiveling here in the head. At the neck, not really too much. We are, however, yeah, we can do that. We are going to have full swivels where the arms plug into the body at the shoulders, which is good. He does have the shoulder armor, so that does block things a little bit. We do have hinge at the elbow. and hinge at the wrist. Going to be the same on both sides. For the legs, we are going to swivel at the hip, full way around. Do we have anything at the knee? No, not really. But we do have a little bit of a hinge at the ankle, which is pretty cool. Now, what's really cool is that you can line Ra's legs up in such a way that you don't necessarily need the stand. I've seen that before, but I would use the stand. We don't have anything for the wings, which is okay. Where the tail plugs into the body, it is going to be a little bit of just a plug, so we do get some small movement there, but not really, because, oh, what is that we have there? Yeah, so it is a swivel, but let me explain after I am done talking about the articulation. Swivel here, here, and here. Full 360 spin view. So what was that atrocity that you saw where Ra's tail plugged into his body? Well, you see, as I made mention before, Slifer's body parts, where they all plug together, are very loose, and Ra's tail here was very loose as well. So what I had to do in order to get those to fit, some may say it ruins the value, I say they're not going to fall apart now. I had to take some Gorilla Glue and pledge floor polish with Future, and mixing those two together basically activates the glue immediately and prevents it from creating the bond, the adhesive, and instead just creates a nice little layer, so this way things aren't super duper loose. But yes, that is going to be the articulation here for the winged dragon of Ra. Not a whole lot of movement, but that's not necessarily what we are here for. And now Obelisk, which has plenty of joints, but unfortunately because of his design, we're not really going to get a whole lot of use out of them, which is unfortunate because the possibility is there, but you know how it goes. So what do we have? Well, as you're building it, the head will plug in on a ball joint, so this way we can move them around. We do have the horns, I guess, here, which are going to block into the shoulder pads. So as you turn the head, we do have swivels at the shoulders, but because of these giant shoulder pads are going to collide into the wing, or as you move the arm down, bump into the leg. So there's that. As you can see in a neutral pose, we have that. So those shoulder spikes are going to block. So what I like to kind of do is just kind of put my obelisk like that. Makes the pose look a little weird, but presents better. So the forearms, where they plug in to the bicep to create the elbow, that's going to be a ball joint. So we can really move Obelisk's forearm around, but not really, I would say, full on ball joint. I would just say a rather sophisticated swivel. And then we do have this this forearm pad with the spike that is going to also cause some movement issues there. And you can hear it's really loud and squeaky. So, yeah. Oh, that's tight. Wrists are on pegs, so they swivel. Swivels at the hips, which can go back like that. So Obelisk could stand like that if he had more than just ball jointed knees, which also, once again, are just effectively swivels. So those can spin all the way around. And then for the feet, the ankles, those are going to be swivels as well. And they like to pop off. I know you saw a ball joint, but realistically speaking, we're only going to get swivels because you can't really get that much of an ankle rocker movement out of them. Even if they can sort of rock from side to side, just because of the way Obelisk is engineered. So yeah, Obelisk is going to have the most articulation out of all of the gods, but realistically speaking, because of his big, bulky design, we're not really going to get too much use of those joints, except for just to kind of sort of change up his pose. So if you're really looking for an action figure, Obelisk is definitely the way to go. He fits the bill a bit more. But yeah, I mean, it works. It's serviceable for what it's supposed to be. So Obelisk gets a thumbs up. Ra, it's okay, and Slifer basically has no articulation. So, yeah. Size does matter here, so how big are these gods? 13 inches? Nah, okay, that doesn't mean anything. Let's put them alongside figures you just might have, so this way, one, you can see how much shelf space you'll need to clear off, and two, you can actually conceptualize how big they are. I do have to say that Slifer is going to probably command the most shelf space, my custom stand not included. It's just very tall. It has humongous wings. Yeah, so it is overall impressive to have all three of these on display, and of course, with your Yu-Gi-Oh! Figures. So buy now, skip, or wait for a deal. At MSRP, we have some, I would argue, relatively acceptable issues. Obelisk, unfortunately, has turned a different color so many years later, and that's just something that happens with the plastic and the dyes and the colors. I get it. Okay, not a huge deal. Raw, because of the plastic, kind of gets a little tacky. Okay, you can clean it up, not a big deal. Slifer, they should have thought the stand out a little bit better, but for $15, the size, all that fun stuff, yeah, they probably didn't really think that they would need to do that to begin with, so okay, that's understandable. Now, in today's day and age, one of these gods is going to run you about $100 on eBay. I'm rounding because you can find one for $140 and another one for $80, depending on who's listing it and the popularity and condition, so on and so forth. So don't at me in the comments. So ultimately what it comes down to, what do you feel comfortable with? If you really want these, unless you get lucky like I did, you're probably going to have to pay a pretty penny. Now, me, I have very fond memories of playing the Falsebound Kingdom with Slifer sitting in the corner, and that just being an amazing Christmas time. You may not have those memories, and for me, when I saw these all on the shelf and I scooped them all up, those all came rushing back, and to be honest, these complete my Yu-Gi-Oh! Display. So, for me, absolutely worth the price that I paid, and not full aftermarket value. So, I'm going to hand this back to you. Hopefully I convinced you one way or another. Well, collectors, that brings us to the end of the video today, and I just wanted to take a second to thank you so much for watching. Now, you've heard a lot from me. I'd like to hear a little bit from you. Drop in the comments down below whether or not you liked it, you hated it, or maybe you were somewhere in between. I also want to take an extra second here for a nice, humongous thank you to all the patrons for STR over the last month who have really helped the channel grow into what it can be today. So to all of you, 2 big thumbs up. Thank you very much. And now the end card should be popping up, which will give you a few clickable links, like maybe to subscribe or head on over to my Patreon, or some short URLs like to my social media or to my Teespring store. There's also a video I hand selected for you, so if you want to watch another STR video, I hand selected some good content for you to watch, so definitely check out that video. Thank you again so much for watching, and I'll catch ya in the next video.